Hello friends, my name is Adnan Qaiser. I am once again present with part 3 of our discussion on Islamic radicalism, which in which we are trying to decipher what constitutes religious terrorism, and we are trying to examine what are the ailments, what are the maladies, what are the problems afflicting the Muslim world that has led us to face this religious terrorism in the Islamic world, which is being associated. And you are aware that the idea behind this talk is to de-link or delegitimize the terrorism from the faith of Islam. So that remains my primary aim and objective, to explain all the elements or the aspects in detail to you, so that you develop a firm understanding about the issue, and then decide for yourself whether or not this violence or the scourge of terror that we have been facing has anything to do with the faith of Islam. And I have told you this is more political in nature and less ideological, and I'm going to prove to you in due course of time. So this is part 3 and segment B of our discussion of an overview, which I've been trying to give it to you with regards to the discussion on Islamic radicalism. So and how we can eradicate it. So in the last episode, I had asked you to hold on to the Sykes-Picot Accord of May 1916, which was signed between Great Britain and France. So the notorious accord, as I told you, had arbitrarily drawn and demarcated the borders and the boundaries of the new Arab states after the fall of the Ottoman Empire in the Middle East during the First World War. So since this is just an overview, I'm briefly touching upon these elements, but be rest assured that I will be giving to you in-depth analysis and detailed explanation of all these accords, which have taken place in due course of time. So later on, after the Sykes-Picot Accord, with the full blessing and support of the United States, many of these undemocratic regimes in the Middle East continued serving the strategic interests and foreign policy objectives of the West, which were twofold. One, it was to ensure the provision of the cheap and uninterrupted flow of the crude oil for the industrialization and growth and development of the Western countries. Number two, it was aimed to stop the onslaught of the expansion of the Soviet Union, or former Soviet Union, and its socialist and its communist ideology from proliferation or from spreading into the world. You may remember that after the Second World War, the world had remained entangled into a Cold War kind of a situation in which there were two superpowers. On one side we had United States, and the other side the United States and allied powers, countries, they espoused democracy, freedom of expression, and other attributes. And while on the other side was Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, which was a socialist ideology, and it was aimed that it should not spread, especially in the Middle Eastern countries or in Africa. So that's why the Western powers, they supported these dynastic regimes, believing that their political systems were reliably stable, no matter authoritarian, for them to ensure and serve the strategic interests of the European powers and the United States. So the Arab regimes, on the other hand, created such deep state type of intelligence networks in their own countries to keep a strict eye on their own people, and keep them repressed and subjugated. So that repression, ladies and gentlemen, erupted like a volcano in the form of violence, as the lid cannot be kept on for a longer period of time on people's aspiration, what they desire, and how they want to lead their life. So understand that while terror could be a new phenomena which we are seeing in the shape of after the 9/11 attacks in the United States, but violence in the Islamic State, Islamic world is not a new phenomenon. So in the subsequent sessions, I'll give you a broader understanding of some of the salient elements about Islamic radicalism that morphed into the religious terrorism slowly. So first of all, let me give you the titles of or the headlines of this presentation, so that you understand the bigger framework of our discussion, where how is it going to break down and how it will unfold. So first is the Islamic Radicalism, a discussion series introduction, which I had already posted at the YouTube on February 9th, 2020. I have also posted a talk in the same connection. It was titled Islamic Radicalism, the Curse of Boko Haram's Religious Terrorism in Nigeria, again on February 9th this year, or 2020. This Boko Haram paper has also been published by the prestigious The Geopolitics on March 11, 2020. So those of you who are interested in reading, they may either search it online, or you may go on my LinkedIn account and you would be able to get a hyperlink. So second is the overview of the Islamic radicalism and religious terrorism. This is the one we are undergoing presently. I gave you the segment A, and this is segment B. So third element would be the root causes of the Islamic radicalism and religious terrorism. Fourth would be from Al-Qaeda to Daesh. Daesh, is Islamic State. So it would be Jihad's philosophical and strategic transformation. In this series, we'll try to learn 7 different aspects of religious terrorism. 1, Islamic religious terrorism's strategic evolution. Number 2, the role of Salafism and Wahhabism in this violence and terror. 3, I'll give you some reference scholarships and books which I have read myself, and I would encourage you to read in through your libraries or wherever you can find it. They're very helpful in developing a firm understanding. Number 4, the present day terrorist organizations in the world. There are so many franchises, offshoots, groups operating, and so their names and their understanding is extremely important for you. Number 5, Al-Qaeda's principles and philosophies. It's very important for you to understand what are the dynamics, what is their mindset that drives them towards this madness. So Al-Qaeda's philosophies and principles are very imperative to understand. And number 6 would be Al-Qaeda's 7-stage strategy to establish themselves and then rule this world through terror. And lastly, ladies and gentlemen, it would be the terrorist organization's online propaganda publications, through which through this jihadist narrative, they try to change the mindset of innocent youth, and especially in the Muslim world, and recruit them towards their ranks. So in the 5th main segment, it would be a caliphate's curtains. In a play, when the play ends its curtains, so the caliphate's curtains, death of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, you may know, was the leader of Daesh, or which I prefer to call Daesh. You guys may be knowing it as Islamic State in Iraq or in Syria. So this would be followed by a discussion on Walayat-e Khorasan, the proliferation of Daesh in Afghanistan. After this, we will try to review pan-Islamic drift. And what is political Islam? It's very important for you to understand what is this political Islam. There are 5 different versions of political Islam, which I'm going to brief you. And finally, at the last end, we'll try to understand Islam and the West in a Huntingtonian clash of civilizations. In the introduction, I had referred to a book written by an American political scientist. His name was Samuel Huntington. The title of the book was Clash of Civilizations, the Remaking of the World Order in 1996. He wrote this book. So, in which Samuel Huntington had theorized, ladies and gentlemen, that after the end of the Cold War between United States and Soviet Union, a new world order is going to emerge in which the world would be caught in civilizational wars. Very important for you to understand. So upon a closer look, you may find that the wars in Iraq, that the war in Iraq as well as in Afghanistan had been civilizational wars, because there was no justification for those wars, but still they took place, and they kept us involved for a number of years, and we are facing the aftermath these days. So moreover, the current tensions between United States and China, that has caused to a lot of frictions over trade, South China Sea, issue on Taiwan, and on China's Belt and Road Initiative, they all fall into a civilizational war. I'm going to tell you that in the background of 19th Communist Congress of China, it took place in October 2017. This congregation, a big congregation, in which China changed its stance, its posture from a regressive or quiet nation to a forward-looking or aggressive posture. We'll be discussing about it. And if you look, ladies and gentlemen, the present conflict which is ongoing between China and India at the Himalayan region of Ladakh, in which 20 Indian soldiers have been killed, and China claims 5 of its troops had also been killed, while there had been no armed conflict, but still. So this is again a kind of a civilizational conflict between a Confucius or Chinese Confucius civilization with a Hindu civilization, because under the present BJP or the Bharatiya Janata Party's, India is drifting towards Hinduization. It has abandoned its secular strategic thought, and it is now trying to assert as a majoritarian Hindu state. So, although this is not linked to it. So, in these episodes, ladies and gentlemen, I'll try to give you a firm understanding of this Islamic religious terrorism and its major protagonists like Al-Qaeda and Daesh. What is their ideology? What are the principles and philosophies that remain their motivating factors to cause violence and terror and kill innocent people around the world? I wish to further tell you the jihadist narrative, both political as well as ideological, and why the militants believe that by following the rituals, customs, and traditions of the Salafist movement of the early days of Islam, they can get the religion of Islam purified from the so-called polluted elements. Number 2, how the dynastic autocratic regimes in the Middle East remain at daggers drawn to each other, just for their longevity in power, their domination in the region, and their struggle to become the champion or the leader of the Muslim Ummah or the faith of Islam. Number 3, I wish to tell you what actually is political Islam and how it has been manipulated or abused to keep the Muslim population fragmented on sectarian lines as well as on political lines. So here you must learn, ladies and gentlemen, different organizations like Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, And in other countries, there are several others, like, for instance, there is Hezbollah. Hezbollah is another militant organization, Shiite militant organization in Lebanon. Hamas and Fatah in Palestine. Islamic Jihad in Syria. Number fourth, how the Palestinian issue and the Arab-Israeli rivalry, ladies and gentlemen, or perpetual conflict, has kept the Muslim world agitated and almost in a state of constant rivalry. You might have recently noted that in August and September 2020, United Arab Emirates and Bahrain have joined the league of those countries who have recognized Israel, or the state of Israel, and established formal diplomatic relations with Israel. So earlier, Turkey, Egypt, and Jordan had formal relations with the state of Israel. So, and it seems, they have done this under their own strategic compulsions, or they had been coerced by President Trump and the United States, who probably wanted to have another feather in his cap, that he found a solution of Middle East or Arab-Israeli conflict. It also, when Arab countries recognize the state of Israel, they grant legitimacy to a country that has been forcibly occupying the Palestinian land since 1948. So the recognition of Israel understandably comes at a cost to the hapless and landless Palestinians. So Israeli government, ladies and gentlemen, is sometimes referred to as a Zionist regime. Zionist regime is a pejorative or derogatory term, which is sometimes used by some Arab countries, especially Iran, to refer to the state of Israel. The term Zion comes from the Jewish national movement, which had led to the creation of the state of Israel in 1948. The idea behind, very important to understand, idea behind the Israeli government as a Zionist regime is to differentiate, distinguish and condemn the administration of the Israel, but not the Jews at large. Excuse me. So obviously the religion of Islam has deep linkages and roots with the Jews as well as Jerusalem. So Jerusalem, as you may know, is also called as Al-Quds or Baitul Maqdis, where the holy and one of the most revered Al-Aqsa Mosque is situated. Muslims, as you may know, used to offer their prayers facing towards the Baitul Maqdis until they were ordered during the times of Prophet Muhammad, may peace be upon him, to head towards Kaaba or at Mecca. So interestingly, belonging to these Abrahamic religions, the Al-Aqsa Mosque is simultaneously being claimed by the Jews, by the Christians, and the Muslims. But it is a long and very complex debate. But I think we should avoid using the term Zionist, ladies and gentlemen, because even if Israel is seen as an enemy of the Islamic world, it deserves to be addressed properly as a state of Israel. We, as a student of international affairs and diplomacy, must be extremely particular about the protocols and the diplomatic niceties while speaking or referring to the different nations and countries of the world and their respective governments. So Palestine remains another complex issue. However, while the Muslim sentiments stand in solidarity with the Palestinians, we must be aware that Israel today has become a reality of the Arab world. Whether we like it or not, it is a political reality of the Arab world. So even if some Muslims twist and toss and turn, the reality is that all these despotic Arab regimes have secretly maintained some kind of a relationship with the state of Israel. So you can expect anything from these autocratic regimes and monarchies which are led by the kings. Arab League. Arab countries constitute about 22 in total, and they form Arab League. Arab League, ladies and gentlemen, was formed on March 22, 1945 in Cairo, which is in Egypt. It was basically had 6 member states. Their primary objective at that time was to foster their multilateral relations, as well as to coordinate collaboration and to protect and safeguard their sovereignty and independent status from external forces. Obviously, external forces included Israel and United States. GCC. Here you must be aware of another platform which is an intergovernmental economic union. It is called the Cooperation Council for the Arab States of the Gulf, or just the Gulf Cooperation Council, or just the GCC. So GCC came into being in May 25th, 1981. Again, it was meant to safeguard the political interests, especially the production of the oil, and to pose as a counter-balancing force against a militarily strong Iran as a united Arab platform. So the GCC comprises of all the Arab states which are touching the rim of the Persian Gulf, which these Arab countries prefer to call the Arabian Gulf now, except so GCC includes Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, which is also UAE, and you may know that UAE comprises of 7 different states, smaller different states make United Arab Emirates. And as I had told you earlier, that the Arab countries had been trying to distort the history. So you may be come across GCC as an Arabian Gulf platform. Excuse me. So there had been a suggestion, ladies and gentlemen, which had been put forward by Saudi Arabia in year 2011 to transform the GCC into a full-fledged military and defense collaborative platform. However, expecting a kind of a strong backlash from militarily strong Iran, this idea could not gain any traction, but this shows that the jittery Saudi Arabia it remains nervous and edgy with regards to a boisterous Iran. So, however, very important, if you have noticed, that when the present Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who is popularly known as MBS, as he started, a belligerent rhetoric in his public interviews, or war-mongering kind of a stance against Iran. So Iran gave a big jolt to the House of Saud through Iran's Houthi proxies in Yemen. There is an ongoing war in Yemen going on with Saudi Arabia and UAE on one side, and Houthi tribes on the other side. So this happened, ladies and gentlemen, when Saudi Arabia's 2 major oil installations, which belong to the state-owned Aramco, were hit by drone swarm attacks at Abqaiq and Khores oil field in the eastern Saudi Arabia on September 14th, 2019. The attack knocked out half of the Saudi oil production, making the Crown Prince to tone down his rhetoric and his belligerent war hysteria against Iran. So thus it makes sense for us to understand why this IMAT, or this Islamic Military Alliance Against Terrorism, was made. It belonged to some say 28, some say 48 Muslim countries. I don't have any specific figure, but it's an alliance which was made by Saudi Arabia, and it has received favorable approval by the United States as well. But IMAT, ladies and gentlemen, so far remains a paper tiger. And it's very important to understand that the IMAT sectarian undertone, which wrongfully stigmatizes a Shiite Iran as the sole source of terror in the region, is fraught with extreme danger. I had mentioned to you earlier about Shia-Sunni feud in the Muslim world ongoing for the past 1400 years, and I will be discussing more about that. So thankfully, without any substantive contribution of troops in this IMAT by participating countries, IMAT remains a ghost force so far. So in one of my papers, which I wrote in 2017, I had noted, and I wish to quote it for you: sometimes it is hard to decide whether the world of Islam should fear itself more or its enemies. The 1400-year-old political conflict that has haunted the Muslims in the shape of Shia-Sunni schism or a split has been pronounced by the Saudi-Iran wrangling. In another paper which I wrote on Middle East, I concluded my thoughts, ladies and gentlemen, by saying that the international community must counsel both Saudi Arabia and Iran to step back from further endangering the world. In the struggle to become paterfamilias of the religion of Islam, both countries have not only inflamed the whole region, but also tarnished the image of Islam. I continued and I said, amid United States' receding power in the Middle East, the international community must step in to instill some sense to Saudi Arabia and its Arab allies, because left to their own devices, these autocratic and otherwise autocratic rulers are otherwise hell-bent in destroying the Muslim civilization. And mark my words, ladies and gentlemen, one of the major root causes of Islamic radicalism and religious terrorism remains this bane, this scourge, these naive and senseless and self-serving and warring Arab kings and Arab rulers. So the member states of the Arab League and the GCC will not lose their sleep for a moment before officially recognizing the state of Israel. So you may ask why? Because they have a common enemy, ladies and gentlemen, in the shape of Iran. So mind you, these despotic monarchies are not bothered about the wishes or the aspirations of their people. Kingdoms and monarchies, you would agree, it has become an obsolete and outdated concept in the present 21st century. They have no place to be, because now people espouse things like freedom of expression, democracy, rule of law, human and fundamental rights. But these autocratic regimes just want the continuation of their dynastic rule after generation, for which they can go to any length, as seen in the recognition of Israel by the UAE and Bahrain recently. And if they manage to please the United States, which remains the sole superpower in the world, then obviously they will not be threatened to be removed from power through the maneuvers which are called regime change. So, however, as students of international affairs and diplomacy, you must be mindful that disputes are resolved through negotiations, and they are based on the basis of some give and take. So even if you would know that even during the wars and conflicts, you talk to your enemies. So I believe that it is imperative to have a negotiated settlement on Palestine with some kind of a give and take with the state of Israel. If Israel wishes to gain legitimacy in the Muslim world, so the Muslim countries should grant it, but only on one condition of getting back a proper piece of land for the poor people of Palestine, whose capital should be Jerusalem, as has been historically maintained. It is also called as a two-state solution. President Obama, a former U.S. president, had been trying for that, and that two-state solution has unfortunately been abandoned by the present Donald Trump administration. So that in the two-state solution, both Israelis and Palestinians could live side by side in peace and harmony, which I don't think it's possible during my lifetime as well. At least it's due to Israel's obstinacy, and the fragmentation of the Muslim world. They have divergent outlook and orientation. So I will try to touch upon the two-state solution during the course of this discussion as it affects religious terrorism. So West's policies, as a fifth part of our discussion on radical Islam, I wish to give you a detailed overview of how the policies of the Western countries they have shaped the present Middle East. Excuse me. How the outlook by the neocons, neocons are also known as new conservatives, or the right-wing elements in the West, particularly in the United States. They have alienated the Muslim population around the world, and how such a rigid stance has stoked religious terrorism in the Muslim world. We will deliberate upon a term which is called the clash of civilization, which is just talked, and try to understand why the West has become a rival to the Islamic world or Islamic faith in the United States, Europe, and Australia, a little bit New Zealand as well. So another issue is the migrants issue. Here we must also examine the economic marginalization of the Muslim migrant population or the immigrant community in the West. The migrants, ladies and gentlemen, leave their countries, native countries, especially in the Muslim world, and migrate to Europe or Western countries in search for a better lifestyle and a safe and secure future for their children and their coming generations. They undertake extremely difficult journeys and use risky methods to reach the shores of Europe, mostly at the peril of their lives. But when they reach there, they are treated like pariahs or outcasts. So the policies of many of those Western countries or the European countries keep antagonizing the migrant community in those countries. So they are forced to live in economically deprived ghettos or shanty towns or isolated localities where kids grow up under crime and abuse. So once they don't get enmeshed into the liberal societies of Europe due to their conservative outlook, religious practices, and moral restraints that comes with their religious concepts as a sin. So all this causes societal frictions and lead to communal segregation. Moreover, due to their lack of proper skills or education or professional training, the migrant community further gets fewer economic opportunities for their upward social mobility. All this brings unrest and frustration, especially among the migrant youth, which mostly are from Muslim countries. So unfortunately, they're forced to adopt the use of violence to make themselves heard, and they use crime just to meet and fulfill their financial needs and compensate their economic privation or deprivation and their extreme measures which they take by killing someone or causing riots. they come as a revenge from the society in which they have been living, and which does not accommodate them or absorb them as normal citizens. So that obviously causes a lot of unrest in otherwise secure societies of the West, and terror and violence remain as part of a tool in the hands of those Muslim youth to exact retribution from those unjust and discriminating societies. So the Caucasian or the white Western race, on the other hand, finds the migrants community's attitude and behavior alien, foreign to their sensibility and civilization. They don't understand why is a particular behavior is being undertook. So thus the societal frictions, as I said, and the chasms or the splits among the two communities keep going bigger and bigger with the passage of time. So then is the liberal outlook of Western media, which treats the matters of religion as a normal, everyday matter. This is a very sensitive issue, ladies and gentlemen. It has caused a lot of heartburn in the Muslim societies. The Western media makes cartoons and caricatures of holy religious figures, which are highly revered in faith. So in view of great sensitivity attached to this issue, especially among the Muslim, this satirical personification or cartoon caricature of holy personalities causes great acrimony and resentment, not only in those respective societies, but also around the world, around the Muslim world. People get enraged and they say, why is it being allowed? So, moreover, in France, urban riots took place twice in the recent past. Once on October 25th, 2005, in the suburbs of Paris and other states, and they lasted for nearly 3 weeks. Second was the Yellow Vests movement, also called as the Yellow Jacket movement, was a grassroots mass protest movement which began on November 17th, 2018, and it demanded economic justice. So since July 2019, a Black West movement has also started. It is trying to protest against the profiling or racial profiling and deportation of undocumented migrants from France. So I think I've consumed a lot of time this time in this segment. I'm afraid I have to leave you guys here and return with part 3 of our talk of the overview of the Islamic radicalism and religious terrorism in part 4 of this series. I do not know how far, what is your understanding level? How are you finding this talk so far? Since I have not memorized this presentation, I'm not a university professor, so I have to consult my notes, which I know is pretty irritating and annoying as it distracts a viewer or someone who's listening. But I could not memorize or remember everything, all the data by heart, so that's why I have to consult my notes. So please bear with me. And I could have used a podcast, but then this interactive audience and communication interaction, it is lost in a podcast. It's just a talk. So this is I believe this has been very essential for your learning experience, to have an interaction with the person who is speaking. So please hold on to this narrative so far, what I have told you, and so once you've gone through the whole series of this discussion, I'm sure it will enlighten you further and to understand what is this religious terrorism, and does it have any linkages with the religion or faith of Islam or not. And then you will be better judge yourself. And it is very important for you to pass it on to the world as well, and tell them that what are the root causes of unrest in the Muslim world. So until that time, ladies and gentlemen, take good care. This is Adnan Qaiser signing off, and all the best. And until next time, take good care. Bye.